Thanks, Julie. Hello and everybody, welcome to this afternoon's webinar with Dr. Sarah Elizabeth. She's a stress resilience coach and trainer, and today she's here to talk about stress-related risks in the workplace. Part of the webinar today will also involve a bit of interaction, so don't be surprised if you get asked a few questions about whether you can resonate or relate to anything or any part of the topics. And if you can, please respond in the question box only, because we'd love to hear what you've got to say. Right, that's it from me. Good luck, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for inviting me to be here today. And thank you all for being here to listen to my talk and webinar today with you. So thank you and welcome. So I'll be with you for the next hour or so. And as Andrea says, we'll be talking about stress resilience and managing stress risks in the workplace in particular. So as Andrea says, I'm a stress resilience coach and trainer, and I am really passionate about this topic. This is one of my favourite topics to talk about, so I'm hoping that will come across in the webinar. And as Andrea says, I will ask you to participate a little bit throughout, just so that you can kind of get involved. And I want you to kind of reflect on what we're talking about and think about how that impacts you and the workplace, where you work, your teams, so we can get a little bit of interaction between us as well, because that makes it more exciting for you, and it means that you don't have to just listen to me the whole entire time. So we're going to talk, as I say, about stress mainly throughout the session. So we'll start off with thinking about what stress actually is. So stress is your body's natural response to a perceived threat. So that could be your fight or flight response to a lion coming into the room, for example. Let's hope that's not happening to any of you. I can't see you, so I'm hoping that that's not happening to anyone. So it's your natural response to a perceived threat, which in a lot of situations is a really positive thing. And so what we're not going to do during this session is sort of demonize stress as a really bad thing, because there are pros and cons to it, and it's not all bad. It's not all a bad thing. So there are some elements to feeling stress and that stress response that are really empowering and powerful. So like I say, the fight or flight response to an actual physical threat is something that you really need in your body, and it's not something you can sort of switch off. It's a powerful natural response to something that's going on around you. So that's one benefit. We wouldn't want to switch that off. That's a really good thing about stress. Another element of stress is it can really help you to perform in a situation. So I'll not lie to you, I love talking about this topic and presenting and talking to you about this topic, but for me personally, I'm quite an introvert, so for me to do this kind of thing is quite a stressful thing for me to do as well. So having those elements of stress when you're doing something like a presentation or a big performance, or if you're meeting new people, or all those sorts of things that, different people have different things that can make them feel stressed. So having that stress response in those sorts of situations can be really powerful and empowering and really helpful. Because it helps you to perform at your peak. So that's a definite advantage as well. So like just before I came on to do this presentation, I can feel that there are stress responses going on in my body, but I'm actually using that to help me focus and to have the energy and the I suppose enthusiasm and excitement and passion in order to give you an interesting, hopefully, webinar. So you can really use the power of that stress response within your body for the good, and really positively, powerfully harness that that sort of stress response. So there are definite benefits to having that stress response, and actually your perception of how stress is and how that affects you can have a big impact on the level at which some of the more negative things about stress can occur. So there's a piece of research by a lady called Kelly McGonigal who talks about stress and your perception of stress. So if someone, for example, sees stress as a really bad thing, if they're ever having a stress response to something, then actually that's heightened and actually has more negative impacts on the person, because they're thinking, oh, I'm feeling stressed and that must be bad, and therefore this is really bad. And you know, it's kind of a snowball effect. So what we're not going to do during this webinar is demonize stress. We're not going to make out that stress is always bad and it's a really bad thing to feel and to experience, because it's not all bad. However, you know, so we're going to sort of do the good, the bad and the ugly. The little bit, the less positive side of stress comes from when your stress response remains at a high level. So you might go peaks and troughs throughout the day, the week, the year. You have a high stress response to something that's happening. It could be something in the workplace, something at home, something that's happening in your life, and you have a stress response. And that's fine. And when that stressor has subsided, your stress response comes back down, you feel calmer again in your body, and you're not carrying that around with you. The downside of stress is when you stay at that heightened level of stress for long periods of time. So when your body is in that stress reaction response mode for prolonged periods of time, that's when it can start to cause you issues, and you can start to see the more negative side of stress. So I'm just going to take a drink, bear with. So it's not all a pretty picture. There are definite downsides to stress. If you are living constantly in that elevated stress response for long periods of time, it can actually do you quite a lot of damage. It can harm your physical and mental health, and it can be really, really bad for you to be in that situation. So, you know, there's lots to consider with stress. It's not all bad, but prolonged periods of time in that elevated stress situation can cause issues, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, because we're talking about things relating to you know, your people's mental health, it's just worth sort of saying that if you are affected by anything that we talk about today, then please do reach out to seek support with that. You know, it's not something that you should go through alone if you don't want to. So there is a lot of support out there for people who are going through difficult times. So you know, please do reach out. A good place to start is your own GP if you're having issues to do with your own mental health. So I am aware that you know, these topics could be triggering for certain people, but that's not the intention of the talk. But do reach out if you need support. So we're going to make a start and talk about what other risks there are associated with stress and how that could impact you in the workplace, and in your business, but also yourself as an individual. So again, this is not a therapy session, and I will be asking you to reflect as an individual as well. But what I don't want to do is we're not going to go too deep, so I don't want it to be too you know, too deep for anybody and triggering in any way. Okay, so how does stress affect people as individuals? So before we start and move on to this, can anybody relate to what I've talked about? Has anybody ever experienced stress in any form? So does anybody kind of understand what stress is? And it could be little things, you know, stress on the level of, you know, I'm stuck in traffic and I'm late to work, that kind of stress response, like, oh, I'm nervous about that, or being nervous about doing you know, an event or a presentation, or, you know, a competition, or that kind of thing. Or it could be, you know, stress at work or any of those things. So it'd be interesting to hear if any of you can relate to what I'm saying so far, whether you have ever experienced a stressful situation, and kind of understand what, you know, day-to-day stress feels like. So if you'd like to put any comments in the questions box, and then Andrea, let me know if any of you have ever experienced stress and understand what that means. So a simple yes, just so that we know that we're all on the same page and we know what we're talking about. So I'll let you respond in there, and Andrea, let me know if any of you have ever experienced that. Now, in terms of kind of statistics to do with that, it's something that generally affects most people. And so the thing with stress as well is it can kind of escalate into other things. So we're going to talk about that as we go along. So for individuals, stress can affect lots of different things.
We are getting some responses, Sarah, so there's a lot of yeses coming through.
Fabulous.
One's workload, another one said from being late.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to see the boxes working.
Fabulous. Yes, it's good to know. I'm not here on my own. No, that's great. And it's good to know that, you know, you can kind of relate to what I'm saying, so that, you know, I know that I'm describing it in the way that you can kind of relate to. So there's lots of impacts.
Sorry, Sarah, we've got a good one here as well. Someone's experienced difficulties sleeping due to mental overload.
Yes, that's a big one. And we're gonna go on and talk about actually all the different kind of some of the different impacts it has on us as individuals. So thank you for everybody who's responded. I really appreciate you getting involved in that way. So thank you, Andrea. So in terms of how it affects you as an individual, so we're going to look at how it affects you as an individual, and also how that translates into the workplace and how it can affect businesses as well. So from an individual's point of view, there are so many different elements, and these are just a few examples, but obviously it's not an exhaustive list, because the thing with stress and general you know, health issues is everybody's different, and the way that you respond to stress is going to be different to somebody else, and the types of things that cause stress for you are going to be different, and the solutions to that are going to be different, because we're all unique, we're all different, we all have different thresholds and different things that are going to affect us, and then we have different ways of responding. So this is not, I'm not saying this is an exhaustive list, it's just some examples of how individuals could feel in that situation. So stress can affect lots of things. It can actually affect your physical health in many different ways, and you know, things such as you've mentioned in the comments, lack of sleep causing insomnia, that kind of thing, has a knock-on effect as well on your physical health. So it's all kind of interlinked, really. So stress can affect, you know, actual things such as you know, heart disease and that type of thing. It can lower your immunity, so you're more susceptible to you know, general viruses, coughs, colds, that kind of thing. It can also affect other elements, such as it can cause weight gain, it can cause premature aging. These are not things that we want to do either. So, you know, there's lots of different elements of the physical manifestation of stress in your body. And then obviously there's the mental health element as well, because stress can lead to anxiety, depression, and even sadly suicide. So, you know, it's a really important topic that we need to kind of understand. It's not just, oh, you know, we're just feeling a bit stressed. There's a lot to it, and it's really important that we understand this for our own safety and well-being, but also, you know, looking at it from a workplace perspective, looking after our teams and the business itself. So there are other elements that stress can affect as well. So imagine you're an individual, well, you don't need to imagine that, but as an individual, imagine that, you know, in a stressful situation, it could affect things like your confidence and your self-esteem. So your ability to, you know, do the things that you would normally do can be really, really affected by stress. It can massively affect your mood as well. So often if people are stressed, they might find that they're more irritable, more easily angered, they might become withdrawn, you know, they could become more emotional. So it can really affect people's moods, and again, in different ways. Motivation is a big one that can be affected by stress. Sometimes when people are getting to the point where they're feeling overwhelmed, they can really lose motivation, because even the smallest things and the smallest tasks can feel overwhelming, and so taking on bigger tasks can just be too much for people to do, so they kind of withdraw and feel like that they don't want to do things. Feelings of self-worth, you know, often people, if they're stressed, they're more likely to be sort of doubting themselves, you know, feeling less valuable, you know, questioning their self, you know, how valuable they are as an asset in a business, or, you know, to their family, or as an individual. stress can affect your ability to think clearly, because often, when you're stressed, it can take over your thoughts, and really impact the way that you think. So you're not able to think clearly and decisively as you would normally, which links us into the decision-making skills. You're not going to be, there's two things. One, you're not as able to think clearly and make those decisions, but also the types of decisions that you might make when you're in that mindset might be very different to ones if you were feeling strong and empowered instead of overwhelmed and stressed. So, sorry, I'm just looking at the rest of them. So ability to grow and learn. I mean, that's another thing as well. If you're stressed, it's very difficult for you to take on new information. So if you're, wanting to learn and do training and that sort of thing, or grow and push yourself outside of your comfort zone, that's a really difficult thing for someone who's under stress and pressure to do, because they're just not in that mindset where they can absorb information, where they can concentrate and feel confident and think clearly. Another area that can affect individuals is creative thinking. So if someone is under an amount of stress for a long period of time that they're not able to cope with, and they're starting to feel overwhelmed, it actually affects their ability to be creative and to think creatively. So again, that sort of links back to the clarity of thought, the decision making, but also, sort of innovation and coming up with new ideas. So creative thinking is something that's massively affected. And also level of enjoyment and fulfillment. People who are in the stressed mindset at that time can't enjoy life as much. You might lose your sense of humor a little bit. You might feel like life is difficult and less enjoyable. So those are just a few examples of things that can affect you as an individual if you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. So how does that translate to how stress affects a business then? So if an individual within your company or within your team is feeling stressed, how would that relate and translate to how, to the business? So in terms of, why should a business bother? I mean, obviously you want to look after your teams, and that's nice to do. And actually, it's a legal requirement that you look after the well-being of your teams. It's not just a nice to have. But also from a business point of view, what are the other impacts and elements? So if someone is struggling with stress and starting to feel overwhelmed, these are some of the things that you might notice within your business. So presenteeism and absenteeism. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the difference between those, but basically presenteeism is when you turn up to work, but you're not really there. So you kind of, physically you're there, but you're not really engaging with work. You're not really pushing yourself. You're not really, powerfully making decisions and doing all of the things that you would normally do. You're just kind of turning up and going through the motions and then leaving again. Versus absenteeism, which is where you don't turn up at all. So people who are stressed may turn up, but they're not their usual productive self, or they might not turn up at all to work. And that's quite common if people are feeling stressed. Reduced productivity. So if someone does turn up, again, a bit like presenteeism, if they are in a state of stress, the chances are that they won't be as productive as if they are feeling calm and empowered. So productivity will most likely suffer, which can lead to missed deadlines. So those are things that can kind of affect the business. Another thing is lateness. So people turning up late. If someone's really stressed and they turn up late, I often think about that as sometimes I don't know if you've ever been in this situation, but you're so stressed that even just getting out of bed feels like a massive task. So the fact that you turned up late it's not good, obviously, but the fact that you turned up at all feels like a big achievement if you're stressed. So lateness can be an indicator that someone's really trying hard to overcome the stress that they're going through by turning up. But it was a struggle and a challenge in the morning. So it's not always, if someone turns up late, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not bothered or they're not interested or they're being lazy. It could have been a massive effort for them to turn up at all. Moving on, quality of work. can be massively affected by stress. You know, if you're not able to think clearly, you're not able to focus on the task, you might not be motivated to do it to the best of your ability. All of those elements kind of combine to affect the quality of your work. Stress can really impact behavioural issues in a workplace. So, you know, how teams interact with each other. It's much more likely that conflict would occur in a workplace where the team members are feeling under pressure and stressed because of all of the elements that we've already talked about. You know, people's mood will be lower, they'll have less energy, they might be more irritable, more emotional, more easily offended. You know, so if you put several people together who are feeling that, that can really affect the interactions between people in the team. And the problem with that is, if someone's feeling a bit stressed anyway and you put them in an environment where other people are stressed and everybody's feeling a little bit tense, then it can quite quickly snowball because it's quite contagious. So even if you weren't feeling sort of stressed and anxious or whatever, and someone comes into your environment and they're, you know, they're being a bit grumpy, or they're being aggressive, or, you know, just not very tolerant, that, you know, that sort of snowballs, and it's contagious. It passes along within the team. So it's really important to nip those kind of things in the bud before it kind of snowballs out of control and everybody's, you know, in that situation. All of these elements that we're talking about now can translate into poor customer service. So if people are not feeling good within themselves, the likelihood is they're not going to be looking after your customers quite as effectively as they could. Increased team conflict, we've sort of already covered that. Increased staff turnover is another one. So if people feel like they're in a toxic environment, or if they feel like the workplace is causing them stress because of the environment, the culture, the ways of working, what have you, then people will leave. And I think people nowadays are less tolerant of a toxic environment, so are more likely to leave, which again is not good for the business because it costs money and you're losing good quality people and skills. Another sad thing about that is, you know, if someone is feeling stressed and overwhelmed, it can be easy for other people to think that because of these things, you know, they might see that they're turning up late, they might see that they're missing deadlines, they might see they're not as productive, or the quality of work's not great, or they're bickering with the team. That can lead people to think that that individual is not right for the business anymore, or that they're not good enough at their job anymore. And it can sort of cause people to sort of give up on them, and you know, and again, that all sort of snowballs because that then affects the individual's confidence and makes them feel even more stressed. And actually what they really needed was some support to get them through that period of stress. So just keep in mind those sorts of elements. All of this that we've talked about can lead to obviously loss of profit within the business. If you're not hitting deadlines, if the quality of your product or work or whatever it is that you're producing is not good enough, if your customer service is poor, you know, if your staff are not there, you've got lots of staff turnover and inconsistency, then all of those elements can affect your business profitability, no matter what sector you're in. And so can this final one as well, a lack of innovation and growth. So we've talked about how stress can affect an individual's ability to learn and to think creatively, and that translates from a business point of view into lack of growth and innovation. So we're not, you know, we're not staying ahead of the competitors because we're not able to innovate because our teams are so stressed they can't think clearly and they can't think creatively. So those are just a few examples. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, it's just sort of trying to paint a picture really for you about how broad this topic is. It's not just stress and it's not just an isolated thing, it's kind of a broad topic that impacts the individual in a diverse way and also the business as well. So it's worth just being aware of sort of the wider implications of stress. So here are a few stress myths that I like to talk about, because these are sort of things that I've heard people talk about or people say or what have you, and I just think it's worth just sort of busting a few of those myths. So just bear with. So the first one, if the team are not stressed enough, they aren't working hard enough. So there is a kind of misconception that in the workplace, everybody must be working really hard and fast and be really stressed, and otherwise they're not doing enough and they're not working hard enough. But as we've talked about already just now, actually by having that elevated stress levels continuously when you're in the workplace, it can negatively impact your productivity. So if you've got a team who are stressed completely, they're actually probably not being as productive as a calm, empowered team. They're not going to be able to think as creatively. They're not going to be able to make good, strong decisions as effectively as a team who are calm, empowered, motivated, and driven to get things done. So stress is not going to increase your productivity. Maybe in short bursts, and maybe, you know, like I've said, it's good if you're doing a particular presentation or a sales pitch or something to get yourself, you know, pumped up, ready for that. In short bursts, fantastic, and it's good and it's helpful. But to be stressed at that level all the time, it's just not healthy, and it's not sustainable for people. So another stress myth: people who are affected by stress are weak and not good enough for their role. I think there's been a lot of misconception about stress as it being a weakness for a long time, and certainly that was. Well, I'll come on to introducing myself a bit more thoroughly in a minute, because I'm going to talk about my story. But stress and feeling stress is a natural thing to occur. It's a natural response to a difficult environment and difficult situations. And people who are suffering with stress are generally anything but weak. It's actually often your strongest, most driven and motivated people who are affected. And you know, you recruit these people because they're good at their jobs and they're good at what they do and they can deliver what it is you need them to do. And it's the stress and the impact of that stress that can impact their ability to perform at those levels, not that the individual is not good enough at their role. And we've sort of touched on that already. So the impact of stress on, you know, punctuality and delivery of targets and deadlines. The next one: people use the mental health card just to skive off work. This is one that really irritates me because, you know, the statistics tell us that, you know, it is going to be impacting a lot of people in your workforce. They talk about, I think it's 1 in 6 people at any given time report feeling concerned about their mental health. So if you think about your workplace, that's going to be affecting a lot of people at any one time. So if you are getting people coming and talking about their concerns about their mental health, take it as genuine. It probably is genuine. And people who are suffering are more likely to hide it than to pretend that they have it. So I definitely think that if someone is coming to you with requiring some support and understanding, then definitely don't just close them down and assume that they're being lazy. That's most likely not the case. Another myth: people who are committed to the business and results driven would never let stress get in their way. Well, I'm going to tell you a little story about that in a minute, so we'll come back to that one. People who are good at their job don't let stress affect them. That's just not true, is it? I mean, stress can affect anyone at any level within a business, at any level, at any stage within their career. You know, anybody can be affected by it, and it's not a you know, a direct link between how good they are at the job. It can affect anybody. Another myth: a well-being strategy is a nice to have in a business, not an essential. Well, hopefully we're all aware that it is actually a legal requirement from HSE that you have a wellbeing strategy. So it's not a nice to have, it's a definite essential, and you know, it's important that you have an effective wellbeing strategy that works for you and your business. And then the final myth is only people in senior positions will ever be stressed out. So, you know, if you're not holding the purse strings on a large budget or, you know, leading massive teams, then you wouldn't ever be stressed out. But that's not the case. People can find any role stressful. You know, they might not be responsible for other people or large amounts of money or or what have you. But even if, you know, people at any level within a business can feel stress in the workplace, you know, things like being put under time pressure, working environments, working with other people in a toxic environment, poor culture within a workplace can all affect people in any position within a team. So don't assume that it's just your senior team that you need to worry about. It's everybody in your workplace. So now, before I go on to tell you a little bit more about me and my story, just let's have a little question and see if everybody's still here and still awake. Can anybody relate to what we've talked about with and again, we'll just have a yes in the comments box. So if anyone's you know, heard any of these stress myths, or you know, has experienced some of the effects of stress as an individual, or seen it within their team. So let's just have a yes, just a simple yes if anybody's experienced any of those things and can relate to what we've talked about so far, before we move on to the next section.
Yeah, we've got some comments coming in now already. One in particular, yes, they even got told that they need to be more resilient.
Right. That's yeah, not hugely helpful. I mean, there are resilience tools that you can learn, but when you're opening up to someone and talking about your feelings and that, it's a bit sort of like saying, I'm guessing it's a bit like saying, well, you just need to toughen up a bit. I was told I once needed to get some rhino skin. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few more yeses coming through. Another one's commented about a personal experience.
Yeah. It is. I'm glad that you're relating to it, and I'm hoping that I'm not going too deep and triggering things for people, but it's just sort of an awareness really to sort of think about how broadly this topic can affect individuals and your team and those around you as well, because even if you're not experiencing it for yourself, there is most likely going to be people in your environment who are going through something similar or experiencing or have experienced something like that. And also, you know, if you go on, sorry, Andrea.
I was going to say the comments are still coming in. One of the favourite terms we tend to hear is man up.
Yeah.
And then another comment was that they were told to find another job.
Yeah. It's frightening, isn't it? It's frightening. Yeah, and that's what we need to change, and that's why I'm so passionate about this topic and talking about this topic and having discussions like this, is to kind of raise awareness really, and yeah, because yeah, I hate hearing things like that, because it's just not right, is it? And that's what we need to change as a workplace culture and that kind of thing. We need people to understand that what's required is support to help people back to their peak performance, and you know, comments like that are just not helpful, are they? So I'm sorry that you've experienced that.
And the great thing about these webinars is we're breaking the stigma, we're reducing it as much as possible. So the more we can talk about this and get it into the open, the better. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and comments. I really appreciate that. And it's yeah, it's yeah, I understand and I appreciate it, and that's why I'm so passionate about what we do. So I'm going to move on and tell you my story, and that will help you understand as well why I'm so passionate about it. So thank you, Andrea, for reading out some of the comments there. Fabulous. So here we are. I know I only introduced myself very briefly, and I wanted to sort of set the scene really before I just waffled on at you about myself. But I just wanted to sort of explain to you why I'm so passionate about what I do, and why I have these conversations, and why I talk about stress and well-being so much of the time. And part of doing that is to share with you my journey and how I got here. So so currently I do webinars like this, and I go into workplaces and do you know,
programs helping people to understand stress and the impact on the business, on their teams, understand it within themselves, and how to actually, you know, there are tools that you can use to build your own resilience, you know, but if you don't know those tools, it can be very difficult to do that. And you know, so those are some of the things that I do. I do one-to-one coaching and like team discussions. I tend to work with sort of senior teams so that they can kind of learn the skills to then roll it out to the rest of the business, so that they can create a really positive, empowering culture, where, you know, this kind of thing is more easily spoken about, and we've got the support structures in there to do that. So that's one element of what I do. I also work in the community, so I run workshops for anybody in the public who want to build on their resilience skills and understand how to manage stress in their own lives, so that it can, you know, so you can use it as a positive tool and also bounce back more easily when things are getting difficult. So that's part of what I do now. And the reason I do that is because I've experienced firsthand what it feels like to have prolonged stress to the point of reaching burnout. So I'll tell you a little story about me and my burnout experience and why that's led me to do what I'm doing now. So rewind about 10 years, and I had a quite senior job, so that had, you know, brought its own pressures and stress to that, you know, to my life. I was one of those really driven go-getters. I wanted to be the best I could be. I wanted to give everything to my company that employed me. I wanted to you know, be the best I could be. I wanted to climb the career ladder. I wanted to you know, use all the skills that I'd learned at university and you know, learn everything and grow and do everything. And so I was so dedicated to my job and so driven, and I wanted to, you know, get places and climb the career ladder, and I was doing it, and you know, and I loved it. I loved my job. So I was doing that, and then 10 years ago I also had 2 children. So I was working, and I was also obviously a mum. So that the children were very young at that time as well. So I had this sort of pressure of wanting to be the best at work, but I also wanted to be the best mum that I could be. And at the time I was married, so I wanted to be the best wife I could be. And I lived an hour away from work, so I was commuting 2 hours every day, and you know, getting stuck in traffic, and I'm trying to you know, leave work, but I'm feeling guilty because I'm leaving work because I need to go and pick the children up from nursery, but then I'm late to pick the children up because I got stuck in traffic, and then the children are tired because it's the end of the day. And the lifestyle that I'd created was just not sustainable. There wasn't, you know, there was no space for me within that lifestyle, and I was just going through the motions, and it felt as though no matter how hard I tried, and no matter how hard I pushed, and no matter what I did, I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up with the demands that were placed on me from every angle. I just felt like I was letting everybody down, and like no matter how much I tried, I couldn't keep on top of everything. So I did what most people probably do, which is just carry on. So you just carry on, don't you? And you think, well, eventually this is going to get easier. Eventually it will stop being so difficult, and eventually I'll catch up and I'll get on top of things, and then that everything will be fine. But that situation didn't arrive. There's a saying that I like, which is life doesn't get easier or more forgiving, but we get stronger and more resilient. And actually that's true. Life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. So I didn't know any of the stuff that I know now. So at that time, I just ignored all the warning signs. I didn't even notice that there were any, and I just carried on and carried on and carried on, just hoping that one day it would suddenly miraculously change, and it did not. So I was sat at my desk. Nothing in particular had happened. I was just sat at my desk. It was in an open plan office. Nothing in particular had happened that day. I wasn't in a particularly stressful situation at that time. Just sat at my desk, and I started to feel a little bit unwell. And the lady who sat close by sort of noticed, oh, you know, are you all right? I was like, I don't know if I am all right. And I started having, like, my lips were tingling. I was having tingling in my, like, pins and needles in my hands. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. And that kind of then progressed to not being able to speak. I felt like I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't stand. And that, by which point I was starting to freak out then, because I thought something really terrible was happening to me, and I'm wanting them to phone an ambulance, which they didn't do, but they did phone my doctor, and they thought, oh, maybe it's like a diabetic reaction or something like that, so they're trying to make me eat biscuits and things. Anyway, it didn't improve, and my colleague actually had to drive me the hour home because I couldn't drive. And then after that I was off work for about 3 weeks. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't, you know, look after the children. I literally, when I was dropped off at home, I was dropped at my parents' house because I didn't dare be in the house on my own, because I was just absolutely in a mess. So I went to the doctors and I had all sorts of tests. I had blood tests and 24-hour ECG and all that stuff, and everything came back absolutely fine. There was nothing physically at that time wrong with me. And the doctor said to me, it's just stress. And I thought, wow, you know, stress is a big thing. That's really knocked me sideways. And he also said to me, the doctor, he said, he offered me some medication which I didn't take. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take medication if you're offered it. Obviously that's individual to you, but I made the decision not to. Because he also said, you need to change your lifestyle because what you're doing is just not sustainable. So I thought to myself, right, okay, I think you're right. And that's what I'm going to do. And because my background is in sort of project management and, you know, problem solving and that kind of thing, I took it upon myself to solve the problem for myself and to see it as a problem solving exercise, I suppose. And I promised myself in that moment, you know, during that period where I was just essentially broken, that I didn't want to ever be in that situation again. And so I was going to find out how I avoid that, how I avoid being in that situation again. And I thought at the time, I thought that I was a failure, and I thought that it was just me, and it was because I couldn't cope and I wasn't good enough. And I thought that I wasn't good enough as an employee, and I thought I wasn't good enough as a mother, and as a wife and everything. Friend, I was a rubbish friend at that time as well. And you know, I just felt like it was me that was a failure, and I was on my own and there was no support, and you know, it was quite a dark place really. So I decided that I wasn't going to stay there, and I didn't want to be in that place again. And so I started researching how do you avoid that? What do you do? How do you protect yourself from stress? How do you become you know, more resilient, I suppose? How do you do that? Because it's not easy and it's not immediately obvious how to do that. And so so that's where the journey began, and it was a selfish journey to begin with, and I thought it was just me, so it was a secret sort of journey where I didn't really talk to people about it because I thought it was just me being a failure. But the more I researched and the more I got into it, the more I realized that this affects so many people. It wasn't just me, and I'm not a big failure, and it's not a weakness, and it is something that you can come back from. I mean, I'm more powerful and empowered and stronger and more resilient than I've ever been in my whole life, and I'm happy to say I've not been back in that place in the 10 years since then. So the stuff that I've learned really helps, but I just saw that so many other people are going through that as well, and I just wanted to talk about it, and I wanted it to become something that we do talk about. And you know, so that I don't like the idea that anyone else would be in that situation that I was in and feeling alone and feeling like they're weak and a failure, because it's not the case. And so that's why I do what I do, because I'm so passionate about talking about it and making sure that people, you know how to protect themselves from that, and you know, going back to the workplace, how to protect their teams and how to look out for each other, so that we create an environment where it is supportive and people can talk if they're struggling, and we can nip it in the bud And it's more of a prevention really than anything. So it's about understanding your own stress levels and triggers and indicators, and how you can respond to them quickly so that you don't end up ignoring it like I did, to the point where your body stops you because you can't take anymore. So there's things that you can do to sort of, you know, nip that in the bud, so you're not getting to that overwhelm and burnout stage. So that's my story, and that's why I do what I do, and why I'm so passionate, and why, you know, it you know, it upsets me when I hear that people, you know, are going through that as well, because I know how it feels, and it's hard. So there we are. So that's my story, and why I do what I do, and why I'm so passionate about that. So linking into that, then, how would you spot signs of stress in your team? So imagine you're in the workplace and, you know, you're wanting to look out for your team. How do you spot those signs of stress in your team? You know, if somebody is feeling stressed in your team, how would you know about it if they didn't come and tell you? And the answer is, you might see some of these things. I mean, we've been through all of these things in the previous slide. So, you know, if you're seeing people exhibiting any of these behaviors, or, you know, these kind of effects are happening in your workplace, you could ask yourself the question, is it because they're suffering from stress? Are they close to burnout? Are they feeling overwhelmed? Because it could be that that is the case. So you can spot it by seeing these kinds of elements within your team. So when I was going through my burnout, these are the ones that are circled in red, are the ones that I probably think that people might have seen in me in my workplace. Presenteeism, I probably did turn up to work and not perform at my best because I just was so swamped I couldn't really function. Lateness, again, that's probably why I was passionate about talking about that one. Sometimes even just turning up to work feels like a massive achievement when you're in that overwhelmed state of mind. Absenteeism, like I've said, I was off with stress, and I didn't tell my workplace that I was off with stress. I said I had a virus, I think, or something. I didn't, you know, it wasn't something that I felt that I wanted to talk about. So even if people are not saying to you, I'm off with stress, it could be stress that they're off with, because they don't always want to tell you that. Productivity will have been reduced, lack of innovation and growth. I think the idea of taking on more responsibility and learning more was just not an option for me at that time, because I wasn't in that space. So think about, you know, in your own teams, if there's anything that you've seen, or anybody in your team who are exhibiting any of those behaviours, and whether it could be because they're feeling a bit stressed or a lot stressed. So have a little think about that for yourselves and your team. And then this is another one. How do you spot signs of stress in yourself? This is a big part of it, is to not ignore the signs. So again, we've talked about all of the things that you could experience if you're under a lot of stress. And this is the same slide as earlier. So if you're experiencing any of these elements, it could be that you're actually under stress, even if you've not acknowledged that for yourself yet. You know, this could be an indicator. So for me, all of those things were things that I was experiencing, but not taking any notice of. I didn't take any notice of any of them until my body just stopped me, because I wasn't taking notes. So you know, it can affect everybody in different ways. Different types of things can cause stress for different people. Something wouldn't affect somebody at all, whereas the next person would be completely crippled by it. So it's, you know, it's individual to yourself, and the kind of things that, you know, are triggering for you, and the you know, the threshold of stress that you have, and the combination of different elements within your life, and all those sorts of things. So just have a little think about how you would spot signs of stress in yourself, and whether you've noticed any of those within yourself. I'll not ask you to share that in the chat, but, you know, just have a little think for yourself if you've ever experienced any of those things for yourself. Now, again, like I said, I don't want to go too deep into this kind of thing, but where I'm doing workshops where we're looking at how to build resilience and how to you know, become more aware of the sort of precursors to stress. And when you're first starting to feel stressed, you know, I teach people how to sort of spot those signs early, so that you can then do some preventative activities, so that you can then tolerate the stressful activities that are happening in your life at that time. So we do things like, whereabouts do you hold stress in your body? Because a lot of people spend a lot of time in their heads, so we're thinking about the thoughts that we're having, but we might not necessarily be connected to the cues that our body is giving us to, you know, how stressed are we? You know, for example, nowadays, now that I know all this stuff about prevention, I'm very aware of what my body is telling me. So if I'm stressed, I'll notice that I've got quite a heaviness in my chest. I can't, you know, I'm holding my breath and I can't breathe properly, or, you know, my shoulders are tense. And, you know, sometimes I'll wake up and I've got like a tension headache because I've been clenching my jaw in the night, that sort of thing. So you can sort of learn about yourself, and everybody's different. So you can learn about, you know, the types of thoughts that you have, how you feel about yourself. So if you imagine, we're not going to go into too much depth because I'm conscious of time as well, but imagine you're in a situation where you are feeling under a bit of pressure and feeling a bit stressed. Would you say that you feel positive, motivated, calm, empowered, enthusiastic? Or in that situation, is it more kind of overwhelmed, fear, upset, angry, frustrated? So it's just kind of recognizing those differences between you know, how you're reacting. And that's a kind of good indicator of how you're feeling. And then as a result of that, you can then do some preventative activities to help you, you know, self-care, and so many different elements that you can do to help you protect yourself from overwhelm. You know, and you can think, you know, sometimes people notice, oh, I'm just not interacting with other people like I would normally, like my temper is much more easily flared, or I'm less tolerant. And that could be in the workplace with your colleagues, or it could be at home with your, you know, significant other or children, or whoever, you know, friends, whoever you're interacting with outside of the workplace. You know, think about, are you able to creatively think and solve problems? Do you feel confident? Energy level is another good indicator. Are you feeling empowered and energized, or are you feeling always tired and demotivated? So there's lots of indicators that we can learn, and that's some of the stuff that I teach in my workshops, is how to recognize when stress is impacting you, and then what to do about it afterwards. So what is the solution? In the workplace, you know, there's lots of things that you can do. There is no one size fits all, because we're working with people and individuals. So it's not like just tell your team to do this and that's it, magically solved. You need a sort of diverse approach that takes into consideration all of the different elements that are there. You know, there's going to be a lot of things to do with the business culture, you know, whether it's a supportive culture, or whether we, you know, are telling people that they just need to man up and get on with it and stop moaning about it, and, you know, all that stuff. You know, you need to create a culture where it's okay to talk about it, and actually there's support network in there. So if someone's feeling it a little bit, you can nip it in the bud, support them, and then they can get back to their own peak performance. You know, it's setting healthy boundaries and healthy working practices. So, you know, sort of moving away from meeting marathons, and there's simple things that you can do, like making meetings 55 minutes long or 50 minutes long instead of an hour, so that people have a comfort break in between. Those sorts of simple things can make a massive impact on, you know, people's well-being and level of stress that they experience. You know, we're not intended to be on full power, full pace all the time. It's about having appropriate processes and procedures in place, you know, so that if someone in your team is feeling under pressure, there are processes and systems that can help them, and they're aware of them, and they can, you know, go for support and have that you know, system in place that helps them to do that. You need a team and leaders who are good at soft skills, listening, empathy, open communication, building a culture of trust. and psychological safety. You know, by creating the right environment and the right culture, you can really get a good handle on this, but it needs some of those soft skills as well. And yeah, building resilience for the individual. Now, it's no good just saying to someone you need to be more resilient, as unfortunately that comment in the box, and I'm sorry you've experienced that, but you know, there are skills that you can learn, but you know, as a workplace, you could provide those for your team so that they know what that means and how to do that. You know, it's not just common sense. You can't just go and become more resilient. It's like, how do I do that? What exactly do I need to do? So that's where, you know, that's a lot of the work that I do, is like helping people to understand what does that mean to me, and tailoring it to the individual, because everyone is different, and you know, there's not a one size fits all that can just you know, solve everything for everybody. It needs to be something that's suitable for people as individuals, because we're all different and we have different requirements. And just creating a supportive, empowering coaching environment is really important as part of that. And I think as well is knowing when to get help, and as that I mean within a workplace. So do you in your workplace have a good, strong well-being strategy? Do you have the support networks and processes in place? Do you have the facilities to enable your teams to be as resilient as they can be? Do you you know, have those systems in place? Do you have a culture where people can support each other, and it's okay to talk about stress and deal with it and move on past it, because it's not, you know, it's not a life sentence. It doesn't happen forever. If someone's feeling really stressed and overwhelmed, we can take them back to a point where they're empowered again. So do you have that kind of thing? Do you have the facilities in your workplace to do that, or do you need some external support? And you know, that's a decision that's unique to you, and you know, knowing your own workplace and environment, whether it is working and you've got an amazing team who are empowered, or whether you feel that, you know, you do need some external support, because it's not immediately obvious. I mean, I've been studying this for 10 years, and you know, it's not immediately obvious to everyone how to tackle this, and it is complex, and there's so many intricacies of it. It's not an easy fix. So sometimes you might need to get someone to come and support you in that. So it's about understanding, you know, where you're at currently and what support you may or may not need in that. So in terms of support, I mean, obviously I'm just one person who's passionate about dealing with stress and building resilience, and from my own personal experience. So I offer services as part of my business to do that, but you know, it's about finding the right resource for you. So I'm not going to do a sales pitch here, because that's not what I'm about, but you know, it's about finding the right support for your business, and the types of services. I mean, the things that I do is online training packages to help people understand the types of things that we've sort of touched on today. One-to-one coaching, so that's often helpful for like your senior team, so that they can kind of understand where they're at and move forward if they're feeling under pressure and stress, but also how do they then support their team beyond that. You know, live workshops, online workshops like this one we're doing now, or in-person ones, and then wellbeing retreats, online training. There's so many things that you can do to support your teams in this. But I think the first thing is to kind of recognise whether you have an issue in your workplace that needs resolving, you know, and where you are at currently, and what the next best step is for you. But most importantly, I would love to connect with you. If you've enjoyed this webinar and you know, can resonate with what I've talked about, if you kind of related to anything that I've said, or just enjoy talking about this topic because it's so important, then I would love to talk to you. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, or send me an email. Or if you've got any questions that you want to ask, do reach out to me, because I'm so passionate about this. I love talking to people about this topic, so I would love to connect with you. And I hope that it's helped, and I hope that you know, it's just been a bit of food for thought, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk. So thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Andrea. Is it?
Thanks a million, Sarah. There's no questions that have popped in on the back of the last load of slides, so I'm guessing if there are any questions, you're going to deal with them directly via the contact email that you've left on the screen.
Yes, absolutely. If anybody's got anything, I mean, it's a funny one because it's, you know, unique. Questions are unique, aren't they, to your own situation and your own experience in your own industry and that kind of thing. So it can be a little bit difficult to sort of ask them in this kind of environment. So I think, yeah, if anyone's got any questions, then absolutely feel that you can reach out to me anytime. That's absolutely fine.
Perfect. No, it's been a really enjoyable webinar. I hope everybody's found some knowledge that they probably didn't have before. But again, I guess the biggest message we need to get across to everybody is at least spot the signs and do something about it, either personally and or in the workplace yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. And if it has affected you personally, you know, if you're thinking, actually, I do feel like I'm feeling some of these signs myself, then please do reach out for support if you feel that that would be beneficial. You know, I'm happy to talk, but I'm not a therapist, so you know, you can reach out to you know, your GP is a good place to start if you feel that you need to talk to someone about that kind of thing.
It is. Other avenues to look at as well for even faster results are things like hypnotherapists, life coaches. There's a whole plethora out there, so you can actually bypass the NHS waiting list and things and get help a lot faster, with results faster as well, and avoid medication if that's not your thing. But yeah, Sarah, thanks a million.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, and yeah, for everybody else in the IIRSM, keep your eyes on the LinkedIn page and wider website for IIRSM for more up and coming webinars. Sarah, thank you so much.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah, for a really thought-provoking presentation. We really do appreciate you giving up your valuable time. And thank you to Andrea and the rest of the Yorkshire and Humber committee who give up their time to arrange these webinars. Thank you for attending, everyone. As I said at the beginning, the recording will be on the IIRSM YouTube channel, probably later today or tomorrow. And please watch out for our next event. See you soon. Bye-bye.